Myself, Joe Ben.
I'm Joe Ben Wittenberg. I'm a grateful alcoholic. Sober tonight by the grace of a loving God that I found through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and have been since June the 26th of 1988. For that, I'm truly grateful. And Stephen, I appreciate your invitation to come here and be with y'all tonight. I bring you greetings from my home group, the St. Francis group in Beaumont, Texas. They're meeting in person just a couple of miles from here. And if I weren't here with y'all tonight, I'd be with them. But it's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to do anything to in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was taught early on to always say yes when I was asked, but this is a real pleasure to do this. I like to, when I talk, I like to tell a little story. It's a story I heard an alcoholic tell. And it's kind of a story that, to me, kind of shows how AA works. It's a story about a little boy who's on his tricycle. He's going down the sidewalk one day, going pretty fast, not really watching where he was going, and he hit a pothole. And when he did, it wrecked his tricycle. He turned it over. It bent the wheel on his tricycle, cut his pants, and skinned up his knee. He got up and he looked around and he said, "Son of a bitch." Unbeknownst to him, there was a Baptist preacher standing underneath the tree watching all this. And he came running over to the little boy and he said, "Oh no, my son, when adversity comes upon us, we take that as an opportunity to say, praise God." Little boy kind of looked up at him and picked up his tricycle and took it off. His dad fixed the wheel on his tricycle. His mother mended his pants, and in a couple of weeks, his knee healed up. And a little bit later on, he was going down the same sidewalk, not watching where he was going. Probably one of us in the making, but anyway, hit the same pothole. Same thing happened. It bent the wheel on his tricycle, tore his pants, cut his knee. He got up, looked around, said, "Praise God." And he got real quiet. And all of a sudden, the wheel on his tricycle went back into place. His pants were mended. His knee was healed. Got up on his tricycle and just wheeled off. The Baptist preacher was watching this again from underneath the tree. And the Baptist preacher said, "Son of a bitch." Now, to me, that's how Alcoholics Anonymous works. It's a process of me taking actions I don't really believe in. And if I just take the actions outlined by my sponsor, outlined by the big book that gives very precise directions, I get better. I recover. And, it's a good thing for me. The steps don't know how many times I've taken them, because every time I've taken them, they've worked. It's a whole lot like if I had a cold or the flu or some condition like that penicillin will work on. I don't need to know how I got the cold, what bug I have, what caused me to be sick. I don't need to know how penicillin is made, how it works on the bug or anything. If I'll take the medicine that's prescribed, I get better. And that's how Alcoholics Anonymous works for me. And it's been a real blessing to me. Growing up, kind of like many other people, I had a lot of fears and insecurities. It seemed like I just never really fit in. Again, I heard an alcoholic describe it this way. It's kind of like when I went to school. It seemed to me like everybody got there about 30 minutes before me and had a meeting, decided how things were going to be and what the rules were going to be. And I missed the meeting. And I got there and I couldn't figure out what I was supposed to be doing. And I spent the rest of my life trying to act like y'all were acting, comparing my insides to your outsides. And it wasn't until I got to Alcoholics Anonymous that I found that, that just never works at all. And so I spent a whole lot of my life with the messages I needed to grow up and be a man and be responsible. And I spent a whole lot of my life just consumed with what you thought about me and wondering what you thought about me and hoping that you thought good things about me. And so I did my best to try to be responsible, and looked like I knew what I was doing, looked like I was doing what y'all were doing. The first time I really got any real alcohol in me enough to do any good. It seemed like it fixed what needed to be fixed in me. It let me be in the moment, let me not have to worry about you and what you thought about me. It helped me just relax and enjoy myself. And it also gave me a good way not to have to be responsible. When I drank, I could do what I wanted to do and not have to worry about anything, it seemed like to me. But, for me, alcohol started causing problems pretty soon after I started drinking. About the only time my parents were pretty strict on me, and they may have known what I was going to be like, but it was a good thing. But I didn't really get a chance to do a lot of drinking until I was in my senior year in high school. And when I started drinking, I really had a lot of fun doing it. Got into some trouble, but I really couldn't start drinking until I went off to college. And first thing I remember is going to a fraternity meeting, a rush meeting for the fraternity. And, what I remember is that I went there and there were a lot of people there. And it was what they called a purple passion party. I don't know if anybody else has ever been to one of those, but they got a big trash can, filled it up with grape juice and vodka and Everclear, and we drank it, and it tasted kind of like grape Kool-Aid to me. And I drank a lot of it, and I think I had a good time. But I know the last thing I remember, I was at the meeting, and then the next morning I woke up and I was in my bed in the dorm room. I kind of woke up and I looked around and saw my roommate over there, and I noticed that there was a trash can right by my bed, and he told me later on he had gotten that over there just in time for me to throw up in the night before. I said, how did I get home last night? And he said, well, you drove your car. And I couldn't remember that. And so I thought I would go out and look in the parking lot and make sure that my car was out there and it didn't have any dents in it and anything like that. I went out there and I couldn't find my car anywhere. And I looked around as much as I could. And I came back in and told my roommate I couldn't find my car. And so we organized a little search party and went out looking for my car over the campus. And we finally found it. And what I can tell you is I don't think there's anything quite as heartwarming as an alcoholic being reunited with his car. I was glad to find my car. That wasn't the last time I lost my car. It seemed like that happened from time to time. When I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I learned that what I'd experienced was a blackout, where they're just part of the evening that you don't remember. That happened to me almost from the very beginning, and happened to me a lot during the whole time I drank. I thought that was just normal. I thought that every time you went out and drank and had a good time and partied, there was going to be part of the evening that you might not remember. And sometimes I wanted to find out what happened, and sometimes I didn't. But I experienced those blackouts just about every time I drank, and what I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous was that was a pretty good sign of alcoholism. I got out of undergraduate school and I went to law school. Stephen and I are both members of the world's most honest profession. And when I was in law school, I got what was I think is probably the best job you can ever have as a budding alcoholic. I got a job as a bartender. And so during the time I was in law school, when I was working as a bartender, I drank for free. The other bartenders drank for free, and we had a good time. Somehow I got out of law school, even spending a lot of time at the bar. Even when I wasn't working, I spent time at the bar when I wasn't in school. And anyway, I got out of law school and came to Beaumont and got a job as a lawyer, worked a clerk for a federal judge for a while, and then got a job with a firm here that I've been with for the last 47 years. They put up with a lot there. But I enjoyed trying lawsuits. I've had a good practice and enjoy trying lawsuits. And it seemed like that was just a good thing for me, because when you go down, you try a lawsuit, if you win, you can go out and celebrate. And I did that. And if you lose, you can go commiserate with all your friends, and alcohol helps deal with those losses too. And so it seemed to me that all the good trial lawyers drank like I did, and so I thought I'd found my calling, and I've enjoyed doing it for a long time. But what I can tell you is that over the years, problems started to happen. I started to get a lot of feedback at home about my drinking and not being where I was supposed to be. Um, and anyway, I was not as cognizant of that. And one day when I was home by myself, I came across a Reader's Digest article, and it said something like, "So you think you may have a drinking problem," or something like that. And I decided I would read that article since I had been getting a lot of feedback. And I started reading it, and what it turned out to be was the Johns Hopkins 20 questions. And since I was there by myself, I decided I would take that little quiz. And it didn't take long for me to realize that the quiz was rigged, and there was no way that any self-respecting person could pass that quiz. And they had the questions were they were yes and no questions, but they really cried out for some narrative answers, so you could kind of explain your answer. But I took the quiz, giving myself the benefit of the doubt, and even giving myself the benefit of the doubt, I got most of them right. And I got to the end, and it said if you answered one yes, you may have a drinking problem. If you answered two yes, you probably do have a drinking problem. If you answered more than two yes, you probably need to get some help. And I'd answered, like I say, a majority of them yes. And so I did what any self-respecting alcoholic would do. I went back and took the test again, and I cheated. And even cheating, I still got way too many of them yes. And what I decided was that I just need to start preparing my defenses for when somebody might confront me about this. And my defense was really pretty simple. I still had a job. I still went to work every day. I may not feel great when I went to work, but I still went to work every day. I was still married. I had a family. Had two cars in the garage. And I couldn't be an alcoholic because I knew what an alcoholic was. That was that guy down under the bridge, that was just trying to make it through one day to the next. And that wasn't me. But as time went by, I had more situations arise where I may not be somewhere where I was supposed to be on time, or may not show up at all. And it finally got to the point where, one night I was out drinking with some other lawyers, and on the way home, I managed to put my car in the bottom of the ditch. And, I kind of blacked out after I went into the ditch. And what I remember is I came to, and I tried to drive out of the ditch. And of course, my car wouldn't move at all. It later took 2 wreckers to get it out of the ditch. And a couple of my friends drove by and told me the next day they saw me there with my car in the ditch. And I asked them why they didn't stop. And they said, well, you and the cop seem to be having such a good time talking that we just figured that they weren't going to do anything to you. And luckily, the cop and I had some common friends, and he ended up giving me a ticket for negligent collision, which is probably the nicest thing he could have done. I should have spent the night in jail. I got a ride home with a record driver, and I found out the next day that while I was sitting there in the bottom of the ditch. My son was getting an award at the all sports banquet. And while he was getting an award at the all sports banquet, his dad was in the bottom of the ditch. And, that just kind of got my attention. I knew I needed to do something at that point. And so soon thereafter, I was at a convention with a good friend of mine, the guy that I used to party with, and I'd noticed the last few times I'd been around him, he wasn't drinking, and the amazing thing was he seemed to be okay with that, and I couldn't figure that out. And so one morning he and I were having breakfast, and I asked him, I said, I noticed that you haven't been drinking the last few times I've been around you. What's going on? So I said, I think I may have a drinking problem myself. And his eyes just lit up. And he proceeded to 12-step me. He told me what he had been like, what had happened for him, and what he was like then. And I knew this guy. I'd partied with him. We'd had a good time, but I could tell that he was different now. And we talked for a long time. Our book says we don't like to pronounce anybody else alcoholic. He pronounced me, I was alcoholic. He said, you're an alcoholic and you need to go to A&A and you need to get a sponsor. And I came back to Beaumont, and with the help of my family doctor, I got in touch with somebody in Alcoholics Anonymous who took me to my first meeting. And when he did, he told me, he said, you're going to go to this meeting and you're going to see a whole lot of people there. And they're not going to be like you. Some of them aren't going to be. And he said, what you need to do, he said, you're going to have a tendency to want to think you're different from all these people. He said, what you need to do is you need to listen for the similarities, not the differences. And so even with that, I knew what I was going to see when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. I knew I was going to see a bunch of dirty old men in raincoats with, no belts on and shoes with no shoelaces, and the kind of guys that I expected to be under the bridge. And what I was amazed to find was there were a bunch of people there that were laughing and joking and smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee. And a bunch of them seemed to be having a good time. And what I saw as I started going to meetings was there were a number of people in Alcoholics Anonymous who really made sobriety look attractive. And so, I started to gravitate towards those people. And I got a sponsor. I started doing what he said. And, what he told me is I needed to start praying. I told him I knew that wasn't going to work. I never had tried prayer before, but I knew it wouldn't work. And he told me what I needed to do was just get up in the morning and ask God to keep me clean and sober in the morning, and at night thank him for keeping me clean and sober if I didn't drink that day. And so I reluctantly started doing that, even though I knew it wasn't going to work. When I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I had already accepted the fact that I was an alcoholic, and our big book tells us that what we have to do is we have to fully concede to our innermost self that we're alcoholics. It says that's the first step in recovery. And, I had really done that. I came here to Alcoholics Anonymous being convinced that I was powerless over alcohol. But if the truth be known, it took me quite a while to get to the point where I realized my life was unmanageable. I thought I was doing a pretty good job of managing my life. I'd managed to stay out of jail. I managed to stay out of big trouble. I'd missed some things, but, I had trouble with that unmanageability, but I knew I was an alcoholic. And so, I went on and started working on the second step. And, I didn't really think that the program would work, because it was pretty obvious to me as I started going to meetings that the solution that y'all had to offer was a God of my understanding or a higher power. And, I always believed in God, but I knew that I had not been acting the way that I had always heard that I was supposed to be acting. And I knew that I had let God down. And I was convinced that you had to be good for God to help you. And, so I didn't really think that the steps were going to work for me. If that's what you had to offer was help from God. But, my sponsor was very patient with me and took me through the big book. And really what I found my answer to step two was in We Agnostics. It says in We Agnostics that, all you really need to do is believe that there may be a power out there that can help you solve your problem. So if you can just believe or have even the suspicion of belief that this power may help you, that's all you need to start on this path. And I could tell that Alcoholics Anonymous and the God of your understanding was working in your life, and it gave me some hope. And so, I went on and got to the third step, and I didn't really understand how I could turn my will and my life over to the care of God. I was still scared of God at that point. I thought He might be willing to help me, but I just didn't know how I could turn my will and my life over to Him. And luckily for me, about that time, there were a couple of guys going around doing the steps named Joe and Charlie. And they'd come to Beaumont about a year before I got sober and done a weekend there. And I got a set of those tapes and was listening to those. And Joe on there said, that when he got to the third step, it was explained to him that what that really meant when you turn your will and your life over to the care of God was that you just act the way you think God wants you to act and think the way that God wants you to think. Our thoughts are our will, and our actions are our life. And so if I could just think the way that I thought God wanted me to think and act the way that I thought God wanted me to act, that was the beginning of turning my will and my life over to the care of God. And it was also pointed out to me the third step really is just a decision to go ahead and work the rest of the steps. And so I started doing that. I'd heard from going to meetings how hard this fourth step was going to be. And I wasn't looking forward to doing a fourth step. And so what I did is I thought that what I would do, I heard that there were some four-step guides out there. And so I started collecting four-step guides, and I got a whole bunch of them. Hazelton has a couple of them out, and other people have done four-step guides, and I had a whole collection of them. I think what my thought process is that if I got enough of these things, I could learn enough about the four-step that I wouldn't really ever have to do it. But what happened to me was I went to several meetings in a row where people had come back from getting drunk and had come back to meetings. And it seemed like all of them said that they had gotten to the third step and hadn't done their fourth step. And, maybe that was a message to me from God that I needed to do my fourth step. And so I decided I might have to do that. And about this time, I was going on a family vacation. And I grew up out in West Texas in Odessa, which is all the way across the state. And I was going to go back and see some family friends and see my family. And I thought, I'd heard y'all talk about making amends, and I thought I'd go out there and make some amends. And luckily for me, I happened to mention my plan to my sponsor. And he suggested to me that before I did the ninth step, it might be good if I did the fourth and the fifth and the sixth and the seventh and the eighth step. Because, we number those things for a reason. And you really need to do that first. And so I decided I needed to do my fourth and fifth step. So I made an appointment with my sponsor to do my fifth step the day before I left. And I spent the day or two before I left doing my fourth step. And I ended up chucking all those guides that I had and doing my fourth step out of the big book and the 12 and 12. And, I went and talked to my sponsor and did my fifth step. And when I finished with it, He hugged me. He said he loved me. He said, God forgives you. And he said, you need to spend the rest of your life trying to forgive yourself for the things that you've done. Um, I left his office where we had done my fifth step, and it just felt like the weight of the world had been lifted off my shoulder. Now, I ended up doing I've done a number of other fourth and fifth steps. And that first one maybe wasn't the most complete fourth and fifth step, but I got rid of the big things that were bothering me at the time and all of the things that I knew I could think of at the time. And that really worked for me. I did what the big book told me. When I finished my fifth step, I went home and spent the hour. I even got my book and put it up on the shelf so I could take it back down and thought about my fifth step and what my sponsor had outlined for me in my fifth step. And I did the seventh step prayer, and the sixth and seventh step were only a couple of paragraphs in the big book. And I didn't really think they were a big deal the first time I did them. Over the years that I've been in Alcoholics Anonymous, I have come to believe that the sixth and the seventh steps are really the powerhouse steps, are really powerhouse steps in this program. For me, the first time I only know these things looking back on them. I certainly didn't know them when I was going through them, but the first time the seventh step really worked in my life was when I'd been going to meetings for a while. I'd been doing the prayer like my sponsors told me I needed to do. And I realized one day after I'd been going to meetings, not drinking and doing that prayer, that the need to drink, the urge to drink, the desire to drink had left. And I knew I was not able to do that on my own. I knew some power greater than myself had done that for me. And, what I realize now is that that was really an action step for the seventh step right there. For me, what I have learned is that for God to remove any defects of character, or even to actually reduce any of my defects of character, I need to stop participating in that defect. I need to stop doing whatever it is. If I'm gossiping, I need to stop gossiping. I need to start saying good things about people instead of gossiping about them. If it's some other defect of character, the whole idea is that as long as I'm doing the defect, I'm getting some payoff from it. And I need to stop doing that defect and just pray that God remove the defects of character. The seventh step doesn't say that I get to decide which ones are going to be removed. It's what it says is I ask God to remove every single defect that stands in the way of my usefulness to him and to my fellows. And God is the one that decides which defects are removed and in what order and what time. The seventh step prayer has been really something important to me also, because as I told you before, I really thought that you had to be good for God to help you. And, the first line in the seventh step prayer is very meaningful to me because, what it says is, my Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. Please remove from me every single defect of character that stands in the way of my usefulness to him and to others. And what I realized is that, what that really says is that God accepts me just the way I am, the good parts of me and the bad parts of me. And I had never realized that before. Like I say, and I've, when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I experienced unconditional love. Y'all accepted me just the way I was. And you didn't ask me who I was, what I was. All you really wanted to know was, are you an alcoholic and do you want help? And, I think that's how God works too. He accepts us just the way we are. And he wants us to get better. And the program and the steps give me a way to do that. I ended up, I made amends. I ended up even paying back I found the owner of the bar that I worked for when I was in law school. It took me a while to remember about all that, but I realized that I'd been stealing from him when I was drinking for free. And I tracked him down and ended up finding him and making amends to him for that. And when I found him, I told him, I said, I need to make this right. And he stopped me and he said, Joe Ben, are you in a 12-step program? And I said, yes. And he said, well, I am too. And that was a good thing because he was a bad alcoholic, and what he told me, he said, instead of paying me back that money, why don't you take it and give it to anonymously to a charity? And that was a good way to make that amend. And I went on and did the rest of the steps. The 10th step is really important to me. It tells me to continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. And when these crop up, and they will crop up, they have cropped up, I ask God to remove them and turn my attention to who I can help, make amends if I need to make amends. And, the program has really, really been a blessing to me. As a result of working the steps and developing a prayer life and a meditation life, I still get up every day and ask God to keep me clean and sober in the morning. I've learned how to meditate and do meditation in the morning. My life is just so much better. I had a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps, a spiritual awakening of the educational variety, but I've also had spiritual experiences. And first one I want to tell you about was when I was in a trial actually, and it was a very important trial, a pretty high profile, and things were not going well, and they weren't going well because of a couple of mistakes I made. And I was really worried about those, and I ended up realizing that what I needed to do was explain to my client the mistakes that I'd made and make sure that he wanted to keep going forward. And he said he did. And during the time I was in this trial, I was going to AA meetings at night. And after the meeting, I was walking out to my car, and I realized that I just got a warm, fuzzy feeling, in me that I knew everything was going to be all right. I knew God loved me just the way I was, and that things were going to be all right whether we won or we lost, and whatever happened with the trial and whatever happened in my life, that everything was going to be all right. And I can still feel that feeling right now. I can remember that. And, I really felt close to God then. And, I've had other spiritual experiences. One time I tried to 12-step a guy and spent time with him. And that happened on a Saturday night. And then the next morning I was getting ready to go to church with my family. And I got a call from the guy, and he was in the emergency room of the hospital, and asked me to come get him. Apparently, my 12-step work wasn't very effective because he had gotten drunk that night and gotten picked up and taken to a hospital. And he asked me to come get him, and I left my family and went and talked to him and tried to help him get into treatment that day, but I wasn't successful. But, what I ended up doing was taking him home and really got him on a list so he could get into treatment and hopefully get some help. And as I left him, I decided to go ahead and go to church. And even though I knew the services already started, my family was there. And as I was walking into the church, they were singing a hymn. I don't ever remember hearing that hymn before, but it was a hymn, and it was kind of a discussion between God and and people, and how it goes is, it's the name of it's Here I Am, Lord. And it talks about the Lord has heard his people crying in the night, whom shall I send? And the refrain is, it is I, Lord. It is I, Lord. And as I heard that, I realized that I was in exactly the place I was supposed to be. I was supposed to be doing just what I was doing. And, I kind of teared up as I heard it. And like I say, I'd never heard that hymn before in the Methodist church that I went to. But apparently they sing that hymn pretty often because I've heard it a number of times since then. And I never can get through it without tearing up. But it's just a real important hymn to me. Um, I my sponsor was really a kind and loving guy. He was the kind of guy that liked to hug people, and he started hugging me and telling me that he loved me. And I was going back to Odessa. I had some work back there, and I was going back on a regular basis. And I was going back and seeing my parents. And I'd made amends to them, but I was trying to go back and see them and spend time with them. And as a result of my sponsor told me I needed to hug people. And I thought that was a good idea. I said, I like to hug the girls. And he said, well, if you're going to hug the girls, you need to hug the guys too. And I didn't particularly like that, but I started doing it. And I'm a full contact guy now. I hug everybody if they'll let me. But I was going back and I was seeing my parents. And when I started to leave, what I would say is I love you, because that's how my sponsor always, when we parted, he would always tell me he loved me. And growing up, I don't remember my parents ever saying that they loved me. Now, I knew they loved me. They provided for me. They did things for me. But, it just wasn't a touchy-feely household. And I don't ever remember them telling me that they loved me. And so I started when I would like take my leave from them, telling them I love you. And nothing happened for a while, and then one day when I was leaving, I told my mother I loved her, and she said, I love you too. And that we developed a different relationship from that time on. And same thing happened with my dad. My dad never could bring himself to say I love you, but he would nod, and he acted in a much different way towards me. And what I have come to realize is, and I heard an Al-Anon named Marcy White talk about the blessing. And the blessing is I'd never heard anything about it, but apparently a lot of people grow up in the home knowing that they're loved unconditionally and accepted unconditionally, no matter what they may do. And I think we all have the need to be loved unconditionally and accepted unconditionally. And that's called a blessing, if you can have that. When I came to Alcoholics Anonymous and was around here, y'all gave me the blessing. And I was able to go back and give the blessing to my parents and enter into a different relationship with them as a result of that. And, it just changed our whole dynamic in our family. And it changed how we did things at my house too, with my wife and my kids. Up until that time, I don't remember telling them I loved them, but I started telling them I loved them. And every time, we just come to develop a different relationship. And it took a while, for my kids were used to me kind of giving them lectures on what they were supposed to be doing. And by seeing you raise your kids and being around other people in AA, what I realized is what I needed to do was treat my kids kind of like newcomers. If a newcomer spills his coffee, we don't go over to him and give him a lecture on, you need to be more careful about that and clean that up. We clean the coffee up, we get him some more coffee, and we tell him, that's all right, it's going to be okay. And what I learned is I needed to treat my kids that way and show them love and show them acceptance. And again, it just changed the whole dynamic of our relationship. I feel like I have a wonderful relationship with my kids now. My son is a elementary school teacher. He lives out in LA, and you know, he and I were comfortable enough around each other that when he was in college and started having some problems with alcohol and possibly some drugs too, he did a really weird thing. He went to a counselor. I would have never thought to do anything like that. And counselor suggested to him he might go to some AA or NA meetings. And he said, well, I don't know if I'm going to do that. That's what my dad does. And I know, I just don't think I'm quite that bad yet. So he didn't end up doing that, but apparently he doesn't have a problem now because he's doing very well. He even asked me to tell him part of my story one day when we were on vacation. Um, my daughter and I have a good relationship too. You know, when she was in high school, one of her teachers asked her to write an essay on her family and her relationship with her family and her friends and her God. And I want to share a little bit of what she wrote because it says it describes our relationship a lot better than I can ever do it. This is what my daughter wrote when she was a junior in high school. Obviously, my parents have been very influential throughout my life. As a child, our home was not exactly picturesque. My father has battled alcoholism for all of my life. Although he is the one with the disease, our entire family suffered. I never noticed a problem in him, and for a while I thought it did not affect me. But looking back, I can see that we were a fairly dysfunctional family. My father was gone most of the time, and my mother was angry and hurt and confused so much. Some of my most vivid childhood memories are of Joe Ben, that's my son, and I sitting on our stairway listening to our parents fight while I cried. Our family has improved so much since then. When I was about 9, my father decided he really did have a problem and sought help. He has been clean and sober ever since then. Slowly but surely, the dynamic of our family has recovered as well. We are now able to actually enjoy quality time together and even look forward to it. We talk to each other about our lives, our feelings, our hopes, and our dreams. My father spends much more time at home now. My mother is beginning to learn how to live life for herself, not depending solely on the happiness of her husband. I would be lying if I said now that we are the perfect family. Of course, we have our share of problems, but compared to a few years ago, it is like heaven. And like I say, that really explains things better than I could ever do it. You know, I will tell you that marriage did not survive. And after a number of years in recovery, we ended up getting a divorce. Uh, and I'll confess, you know, the primary reason we didn't we got a divorce was I was not practicing the principles in all of my affairs. You know, I was not as good a husband as I could have been. But you know, we ended up getting a divorce and ended up making amends to each other. I uh, I was in Alcoholics Anonymous and going to meetings, and I decided I was never going to get married again. You know, I'd had enough of that. And as it turned out, an old friend of both of my first wife and I came into town uh, looking, and she called looking for my wife, and she ended up getting me. And this was a woman that was in the same high school I was. I'd met her as a freshman in college, and she and I were drinking buddies. I mean, she and I would ride back to Odessa together and drink a lot of beer. But she was the one that got my wife her first job out of school, and as it turned out, that woman, we were talking early on one day, and I don't know if she said it first or I said it first, but he said, "I'm never going to get married again," and the other one said the same thing, because neither one of us, both of us had been in marriages for 30 years, and we're not looking to be married anymore. But she got sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, and she would come into town from time to time. And we started going to meetings together, and then started going to conferences together. And as we like to say, we fooled around and fell in love. And we got married in 2001, and the last 19 years have been the best years of my life. My wife is sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. She is a good member of AA. She sponsors lots of women, and we have an AA household. And for me today, what it's like today is I need to continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. My biggest problems are pride and ego and my selfishness. And I'm convinced that the grace of God is available for everybody in an AA meeting, but the thing that blocks me off from time to time and blocks others off from time to time is our defects of character, my selfishness and self-centeredness, and my pride and my ego. My wife and I, even though we love each other, may even have an argument every once in a while, and we're good about making amends pretty quickly, and we both can admit after we get through with that it's really just our egos arguing. It wasn't really us, it's our egos, and we both have big egos. But the program has been a real blessing in my life. When I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I heard people say that they were grateful alcoholics. And I just couldn't understand that. I could understand being grateful that you were sober, but being grateful that you had a progressive terminal condition. I'd learned a lot about alcoholism over the years, and I knew that alcohol could cause brain damage. And I figured that those people that said they were grateful alcoholics were just the ones that had the brain damage. But, I identify myself today as a grateful alcoholic. I'm not grateful about all the harm that it caused, but I'm grateful I had the disease, because as a result of having the disease, I was forced to come to Alcoholics Anonymous, get a sponsor, work the steps. And as a result of that, I have peace and serenity and happiness and a much better life than I ever could have imagined before. I have a purpose in life. Trying to help other alcoholics is a real blessing. To see that light come on in somebody else's eye is just wonderful. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be with y'all tonight, and I appreciate you asking me, Stephen. And that's all I got. Thanks.